South Africa's expulsion of Israel's most senior diplomat is one of the most extreme diplomatic steps a government can take and is reserved for the most serious violations such as espionage or gross misconduct. This expulsion represents state capture 2.0, and because of it, President Ramaphosa and his government will be cursed, the ANC will be cursed, and they will bring curse on the people of the Eastern Cape. Let me explain why I say this. The reasons the government has given for the expulsion are flimsy, incoherent, and evasive. The real reason is that the Israeli embassy in South Africa was working with local communities to help bring clean water to the people of the Eastern Cape, which is the poorest and most neglected of all of our provinces in this country, and is facing a real water crisis driven by corruption and political neglect. According to Statistics South Africa, more than 3 in 10 families in the Eastern Cape do not have access to a reliable water source. Water quality has deteriorated to the point of a public health emergency. In major urban centers, including Nelson Mandela Bay, authorities have repeatedly issued do not drink notices following confirmed E. coli contamination. The poor are hardest hit. Households without means are unable to buy bottled water and are forced to queue for hours or to share dirty water with livestock. Statistics South Africa shows that almost 50% of all Eastern Cape households rely on pit latrines, with untreated human waste routinely stored on site, often close to homes and water sources. Just think about that. It is 30 years into democracy, and half of the families of the Eastern Cape have no plumbing and proper toilets, simply because this government does not care. The health consequences are disastrous. Rampant diarrheal disease is still among the primary causes of child illness and death in the province. Chronic exposure to waterborne pathogens is directly linked to stunting, anemia, and impaired cognitive development in young children. Schools have repeatedly been closed because sanitation systems failed, violating children's constitutional right to water and education. The South African Human Rights Commission identifies lack of access to clean water and sanitation as one of the most frequent and severe human rights violations in the Eastern Cape. This combines with rampant poverty and unemployment. Only half of all families in the province receive a regular salary to produce a place of human misery on scale. And so, traditional leaders and community structures in the province reached out to Israel for help. And yet, when the Jewish state answered the call, being prepared to explore ways to alleviate human suffering and deliver clean water and practical solutions, the ANC's response was to halt the program and expel Israel's senior diplomat. Israel is a global leader in water management and agricultural innovation across Africa. Israeli technology is being used to address drought, water scarcity, food insecurity, and rural underdevelopment. But the South African government thought that the optics of Israel helping poor South Africans would significantly damage public support for its hostile foreign policy on Israel. Already polls show that South Africans are increasingly skeptical about the government's policy towards Israel. Therefore, the government felt it had no choice but to stop the program, even if that meant that people would have to continue to share water with livestock and that children would die. That is how much the South African government hates Israel and the Jews, that it is prepared to let its own people die rather than concede that its foreign policy on Israel is misguided. And that is why President Ramaphosa is a cursed leader of a cursed party. Almost as bad for the prospects of poor South Africans is that the ANC's decision to expel Israel's senior diplomat further endangers South Africa's already precarious relationship with the United States, particularly with the Trump administration. At this very moment, negotiations around AGOA, critical to South African exports, jobs, and economic stability, are under scrutiny in the United States Congress. One of the major concerns repeatedly raised is the South African government's extreme anti-Israel policies. Thus, this latest action does real damage. It risks trade relations. It deters foreign investment. All of this harms economic growth. Right now, there is nothing more vital to alleviating poverty and reducing unemployment in South Africa than a growing economy. But the decision to expel the senior Israeli diplomat must not be viewed in isolation. It forms part of a pattern of behavior by the ANC government, a foreign policy that consistently prioritizes the ANC's own agenda of supporting Iran and its global Islamist objectives above this country's own national interests. Consider this: the South African government recently refused to support even the symbolic UN Human Rights Council resolution denouncing Iran's brutal crackdown and calling for international scrutiny. What happened in Iran, where more than 30,000 civilians, citizens, are reported dead in the protests, represents one of the most blatant violations of human rights in our time. And while protests raged in Iran, while demonstrators were clubbed, arrested, tortured, executed, this government was conducting naval exercises with Iran, Russia, and China hosted in South African waters. It would be foolish to believe that President Ramaphosa did not know about these naval exercises or that he sent an instruction that Iran be expelled from them. That never occurred. This subservience to the Iranian regime has been clear since October 7. From the very beginning of the war, I warned that this government had become and was acting as Iran's useful idiots, serving as a proxy for one of the most brutal regimes in modern history. The Islamic Republic is an isolated, broken, fundamentalist regime that exports terror across the Middle East and far beyond, and still this government supports it. It has now been revealed for all to see that all along, from the beginning, South Africa has been acting at Iran's behest. This government masked its ICJ case against Israel in the language of justice and human rights. But when Iran's human rights abuses were in front of the UN in the plainest way possible, South Africa said nothing. That is when the mask fell. It revealed that the ICJ case against Israel has had nothing to do with human rights. It was about President Ramaphosa and his government acting as a proxy for Iran on the diplomatic front, just as Hamas did on the military front. And so, the latest action against Israel fits this same pattern, a foreign policy that is driven not by the interest of the citizens of this country, but by foreign interests. What is driving this agenda? Firstly, a radical anti-Western ideology embedded within the ANC, and second, and far more disturbing, the persistent cloud of corruption surrounding South Africa's foreign policy. There is ample evidence that South Africa's foreign policy has been captured. The MTN-Iran deal, which was negotiated by Ramaphosa himself when he was chairman of the company, and so much else. The shielding of Iran at the UN, the joint naval exercises, the relentless hostility towards Israel. When a government repeatedly takes positions that are impossible to justify morally and impossible to justify in the national interest, and when those positions consistently benefit external bad actors, then you are forced to conclude that South Africa's foreign policy has been traded away. What we are witnessing is state capture 2.0. State capture 1.0 involved the looting of state-owned enterprises. State capture 2.0 involves the sale of South Africa's foreign policy. And now it is unraveling. South Africans know and believe the words of God expressed in Genesis 12:3, when he promised Abraham, "Those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed." In becoming a proxy for Iran and directing its diplomatic weapons at Israel, the ANC has made itself a cursed party. President Ramaphosa has made himself a cursed president. The political consequences are clear. The ANC has lost its majority. Polls show its supporters collapsed to record lows, and it stands to lose all major metropolitan cities in the upcoming local elections. And with actions like the expulsion of the Israeli diplomat, the curse deepens. Those who bless you will be blessed. Those who curse you will be cursed. The reckoning is coming.